Good, evil, moral, oral. I find it pretty interesting how, despite the long and viciously brutal history of human civilization, these terms restrain most of us. Peace and civility, yet that's a word, is something we all preach and live by, yet fly out the window with light speed in certain situations. If you really sit on the thought that the world was going to end to one of the scariest and most unstoppable forces, and not only do you have the power to control it, but the fate of the entire world rests on your shoulders from the moment you come out the punani, do you think you have what it takes to save humanity as a whole? I think a good chunk of people would say yeah. But what if in order to save the world, you have to sacrifice yourself and or those you cherish the most? What about now? Or do you think there's another way to get the best of both worlds? You can save humanity and not put your loved ones through such turmoil and maybe even come out alive. These are just some of the many questions that I still think about after finally getting through all of Attack on Titan. TLDR, objectively, it's a masterclass in media in terms of story, setting, direction, and all that jazz. But I really want to dive into everything this show made me feel during my watch. In between seasons, I wrote down all of my thoughts about what I witnessed during the moment, because I thought it'd be interesting to compare what I thought then to what I now know and see how I feel about the show after sitting with it for a couple days. I will be talking about season 2 and beyond, as I already gave my opinion on the first season a while ago if you haven't seen that. But the first thing I really want to start off with saying is that I feel like Attack on Titan is the type of show, it's equivalent to a game whose true ending is locked behind New Game Plus. Kind of like with Nier Automata, you can get away with playing the first ending and walk away with a good understanding of the lore, but you won't truly get it until you go back and play through ending B and C as well. Maybe even D and E, I think, if it's canon, whatever, it's been a while. The final season ends so abruptly and goes so beyond my expectation for what kind of ending it should have that I completely felt lost once the credits started rolling. Empty, conflicted, melancholy, whatever synonym you want to use to express my initial reaction. This just can't be how it ends, I thought. It really rocked me and everything I thought I understood about it from the first season to the final episode. Usually when a show makes you feel like that, I feel like a lot of people would say that they don't like it or that it doesn't make sense. And what makes me even more conflicted is that I don't even think I can say that about Attack on Titan. And I don't think I could really come to terms with I can't come to terms with how it ends unless I feel like I go through it again with all the knowledge of the story that I have now. I guess for this review, I kind of want to start with the criticisms that I have, which really isn't many. So we'll start with that. First thing I want to say though is that I did have a certain theory about where this story would lead to. Right before season 2, episode 6, I had a suspicion that the true plot was all 3 worlds were covered. They covered a country that birthed some serum to turn humans to titans as a means for military power or control and or survival, kind of like having a nuke, right? This serum can wipe memories, but the chosen or true titans are those who kept their mental and memories and can somehow turn back to human, right? So they use this to infiltrate and revolt against the higher-ups and try to restart humanity. There are newer humans with the power that are being trained and manipulated to defend against this coup that are among the scouts, right? So during infiltration, these the OGs, we'll just call them OGs, the original titans that, were able to transform on their own will find out who's been turned, who has control of the power and try to recruit them to take over, right? So Aaron's dad was one of the scientists who developed the serum, but had to change her heart way too late. I thought he was still alive and in hiding, and left clues for Aaron to figure out the truth, and hopefully steer Aaron in his sense of resolution. In hindsight, I was kind of right to a certain extent, but bro, did things take a huge turn in a direction I was not ready for? So there's quite a few anime that I've watched where foreshadowing was one of the main tactics that was relied on heavily throughout the story, and a good amount of these animes, I feel they would withhold information that should have been stated way before it actually was. This isn't necessarily a bad writing tactic, I believe, but it definitely leaves me a bit confused going through, and it makes me feel dumber than I actually am that I didn't catch on to certain moments. A lot of the twists and essential plot points are subtle. They do leave you with a suspicion, but that's if you even notice it going on under like 2 or 3 other situations happening at the same time. But when the story takes a turn, you start piecing together prior knowledge, and only here is when things make sense and you realize that you don't know at all where this was going. Okay, so here, as an example of what I'm talking about, I was going to use the scene of Reiner, Americani, and them going to the tower to find out about the hole where the Titans were supposedly coming through. and Amir was scrounging for food, and she found a can of fish, right? And she's saying, "Oh, I don't really like herring, but this will do." Reiner was like, "Oh, how do you know that's herring?" Right? I was gonna use that as a point where, oh, he kind of found out something about Amir. She's somebody to pay attention to. So that little piece of information, from there until the part where the story actually progresses, really wasn't as long away from each other as I thought. They were actually pretty close, and it's like a lot of moments like this. It's like when you have a question, it usually gets answered no more than like 2 episodes at most past that point. So that's not a good example. And in my defense, I'm watching this well past the point of widespread discussion. I can't infer anything with anybody. So all I can really do is just notice something, have a thought, and just follow along in the dark and try to understand what's going on, right? A show like this, you can't catch everything going on during your first watch unless you watch many shows under this type of genre or are just smart, like not me. So I'm just gonna go ahead and skip this critique. I was essentially saying that I feel like there's moments that happen in the show and you as a viewer will notice it and think, this is a pretty suspicious moment. You would think that the characters in the show would act a certain way, right? Or at least make you as a viewer understand that they're gonna remember that and move accordingly with that information. Again, that scene doesn't really make sense. And when you think about it, in a show about like people in the army and shit like that, of course you're not gonna tip off the enemy by acting strange after noticing they say something. But that was gonna be one of my complaints. Again, as somebody who's just watching and trying to understand everything for the first time by himself, it just, some moments kind of felt like, oh, you foreshadow something here, and I feel like at that moment there's like no reaction or anything in the story to show you that these characters take that to heart and react accordingly until like much later. That was my argument, but doesn't really hold up. Other than that, the only other complaint that I have, which I don't know if it's really much of a complaint, it would be about the ending in general. I don't like it as much as I thought I would. Even if I do, I'm still not really sure. It makes sense given how the Titan powers work, where it comes from, Aaron's explanation of why he did what he did. But part of me feels like it kind of felt like a cop-out to some degree. Or that this series was being rushed and to end, they just needed to fucking do an ass pull to kind of tie everything together. What I ultimately got from the ending is that in the face of our own doom, humans will remain as they are. Selfish, sometimes idiotic, irrational, and quick to violence. There will always be conflict as long as we live. This isn't something that can be eradicated, and we'll always want what's best for us before anyone else. That's it. And if anything, Attack on Titan made me realize that I very much prefer a more hopeful ending to a series, or at least something more to chew on, because personally, I've held on to a nihilistic view on life for a good chunk of my adolescence and even into adulthood, and it really wasn't until like a couple years ago that I started to get over it. So an ending like that feeds into a viewpoint that I no longer really associate with. I still do hold the belief that there is no real answer or meaning to the history of humanity other than we just exist and have adapted to life on Earth up until this point. But I mean, if there is no meaning in life itself, you might as well off yourself if you don't want to continue suffering through just life with nothing good lasting. It's a pretty fucked up way to look at life. But obviously, as you can see, this isn't something that I was able to do. And that goes for a lot of people, thankfully. So I feel like when you hold on to a viewpoint like that and you get to this point, you kind of graduate from that to a belief more of might as well make the most of this life while you're here. This graduation from a true nihilistic viewpoint on life forces a little bit of blissful ignorance to what you already know or believe. That being that there is no real meaning to anything. And this blissful ignorance helps create action despite the meaningless, and you start wanting better for yourself or happiness to combat what you believe is true. 16 through 19-year-old me was at his lowest point of depression. I eventually fell into this belief, and it debilitated me heavily. Shit, I even stopped skating, the one hobby that brings me joy in my life no matter what, throughout my whole life. And I just stopped. I truly lost purpose. And after switching beliefs, you know, I should just make life fun while I'm here, is when things actually started to look better. I would go outside again and genuinely make efforts to engage with people. I mean, look at what's going on in the world now. Shit is kind of hopeless, bruh. But in these hopeless times, continuing to believe in the good that's out there for us, short-lived or not, I've been enjoying my life more and more. So with this in mind, I can't make myself agree with the ending, though objectively it is sound with the rest of the series. There is a small chance of hope in the end, but that takes a miracle, and it will never live long, as we can see by the end, because they nuke the shit again. The truth will be known again, and humans will give in to their irrationalities and repeat tragedies. It is a really interesting way to end the series. It's very grim and realistic, honestly. This I don't necessarily have a problem with. It's just when throughout the whole show, you're constantly told to fight and hang on, hope, and do what you power what you can for humanity. You know, I'd expect a slightly more positive ending than 80% of humanity just going like that. And, you know, the heroics of the scouts not really amounting to much in the end, since, you know, the radicalists still thrive and the problem is still there. I mean, Eren basically did have return by death and took as much torment as he could via trial by fire before giving in and entrusting the power to those in the future to find a way to coexist or thrive despite the Titan power still remaining, possibly. This might be a spoiler for these other anime that I get reminded of, so just skip here if you don't want to hear the ending to these. The end of Attack on Titan to me is similar to Devilman Crybaby and Cyberpunk Edgerunners. All three of these shows end in a way where the evil essentially wins in the end. Maybe not so much Cyberpunk, because the team just wanted to escape the slums, which they do in the end, at least Lucy. But the antagonists still have control and nothing about the world changes for the better. In Devilman Crybaby, it ends with a fight between Akira and Ryo, the main character, and his best friend, who turns out to be Satan, kills him and destroys the planet, only to realize that's not what he wanted. If I remember right, he was being manipulated in some way. It's been a long time, but the Earth is destroyed. It either blew up or there was another Armageddon or something, some shit like that. All in all, there wasn't much hope at the end of it all. There wasn't anything really. But what these series do that put it in a more favorable spot for me is that, at least in the destruction and end of life as these characters know it in the setting they come from, there's something to hold on to that makes living past this scenario worth it. With Devilman, I hear theories of the last few seconds symbolizing a rebirth or a cycle, so things have a chance to turn out way different, which I kind of believe. With Cyberpunk, the moon houses a bunch of people who wanted to escape the corrupt city. So with this batch of individuals on the moon, there can be a story that continues and can branch into something that can be positive. I mean, we have a sequel, so who knows, that main character might be able to actually make a change more so than David. With Attack on Titan, all endings I could think of just end in a large-scale massacre of one group or another, which will inevitably lead to wars that may end with a nuke to restart this cycle. Like, there's not much of a positive resolution in sight. The only end goal that I see with that is destruction. I was talking to my boy about this, and apparently I fall into the majority of people who felt very conflicted at the ending. I kept out of the online communities because I wanted to stay as spoiler free as possible, and I did manage to not find out anything that would hinder my raw reaction to the series. So realize everything that I'm saying is from a perspective where I'm figuring this out alone, with no real prior knowledge of anything or anyone to figure this out with or bounce ideas off of. But I would say again that I don't hate it. It was enjoyable and very unique in its setting, and consistently kept me guessing and unsure of where it was going in a good way, I would say. Personally though, a show like this with that message is something that I would only hold to an objective stance. I really wanted to walk away claiming this as one of my new favorite shows, but I just can't. And I think it's because I honestly see myself a little bit in Eren. With such a massive amount of power, it's only a matter of time before you lose control. I mean, look how celebrities act with the influence they have. And of course you want to go out in a heroic manner, but imagine finding out that you're destined to die with the rest of your race. What would you really do? what could you do? Realistically, I can see myself either carrying out Zeke's plan to live with the rest of my people till the end of our days, or just take everybody out that's after us. So I don't even think I could complain. However, it is an example of really solid and engaging storytelling you'd be crazy to not finish or skip out on. It honestly does a fantastic job of portraying humanity very realistically and relating so much to the real world that, and how we truly act, that for me it's a bit uncomfortable when you really digest it and come to terms with how it ends. I feel like I've just been complaining a lot, so I now want to hit y'all with some of my favorite parts of the show. So the first that I really enjoyed was all the fights with Eren and Reiner. The choreography and adaptation they both go through with each encounter was actually exciting to watch. Like, it felt like a genuine rivalry for the characters who kind of shared the same fate but were on opposite ends. I do think Levy? I keep doing that. Why do I keep doing that? I do think Levi was a really good character to have make it to the end of the show. While he was always cool, I went from feeling pretty neutral to praying for that nigga's safety and hoping he could find the truth and honoring Erwin before he goes. So all scenes where he had to lead the team and figure out the best course of action that had the least amount of casualties, you know, as he was losing so many people, seeing a weight of that burden him so much kind of felt like seeing Nanami lose steam in the subway in JJK. Like, he really turned around for me as a character, so I enjoyed all of the scenes where he played like a major role. Lastly, oh man, I'm not even gonna lie, this moment made me cry, man. Hange going out in a blaze of glory on some real Rengoku shit. When I heard Set Your Heart Ablaze, man, I lost my shit right there. I feel like if this nigga Levi could survive a point blank bomb to the face and come out as okay as he did, I would have thought she could have got out of the steam, or at least taken some clothing off so she wouldn't burst into flames like she did. But at least the send off was very heroic and cinematic, and to the very end she did manage to help them escape by the skin of their teeth. She did a major favor for them, and at least she's in her own paradise now and can tell stories with Eren and enjoy the beautiful blue skies. Well, there goes the fancy background. But last thing I want to bring up, anybody else get really thrown off with the whole time travel shit? Like, I was on board with the whole story up until that point. This nigga Eren talking about, oh, he could go back and forth in time and literally rewrite history on the spot and can be seen influencing the history. Like, what? I personally think we could have did without that. All it did was really confuse me even more and seemed like such an ass pull to get the story to where it was. I mean, it still does manage to make sense given everything else, but I feel like there could have been a better way to tie the story together. Like, it seemed like it wasn't exactly intentional, but whatever. All in all, I don't regret ruining my sleep schedule for this show. It's really chaotic and thought-provoking, and with all the emotions it made me feel, I won't forget the impact that it had on me. I think that's all I had to say, though, about Attack on Titan. I'm glad to have finally gotten through it, and now I'm at a point of not knowing where the fuck to go from here. I might just watch some shitty isekai to kind of regulate from such a crazy story. But that's all for me. I hope y'all enjoyed. I'm gonna get up out of here, so y'all stay up, and I'll see y'all in the next one.